Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a good lunch. Yeah. All right. I love the flair in the front rows there. Very good. So today we're going to be talking about the fintech market in LatAm, some key developments in the fintech market in LatAm, and we're really going to be I think Latin America has really emerged as really one of the fintech capitals of the world, like Brazil specifically, but also other markets like Mexico, which we'll be talking about. And it's really interesting to note that even though fintech investment and kind of some momentum globally has slowed down over the past year or two, momentum in Latin America continues to increase. And we're going to explore some of that here today. And I think we're trying to really position Latin America as just really the trailblazer of the world when it comes to just new innovative financial technologies. So super excited to be here. My name is Aaron Stanley. I'm founder of a platform called Brazil Crypto Report, which explores a podcast, newsletter, media platform that explores digital asset fintech adoption in Brazil, Latin America. I'm an American, U.S., but I live in Brazil for a while, and really excited just to see kind of how these technologies are being applied in this part of the world. Because it's coming from the American view, it's not something you can really appreciate until you're actually in these countries, in these markets, seeing the impact. So I have a really great panel here for you today. We have Miriam Cosio, who is the Chief External Affairs Officer at Clip. And then we have Gerry Giacomán Colyer, who's the co-founder and CEO at Clara. So I'm going to take a minute, and I'm going to let you both just give yourselves a quick introduction. Take like 30 seconds. Miriam, if you want to go first.
Okay. Before everything, thank you for inviting us here. So as you said, I am Chief External Affairs Officer at Clip. And Clip, for you who doesn't know, it's similar to Stone or Pago Seguro, but for Mexico. I have been there for 10 years before I was the Chief Operating Officer. I'm very glad of being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here among friends. I'm Gerry, co-founder CEO at Clara. So we are a company that's helping other companies make and manage all of their payments. We started with corporate credit cards, and we have the fastest growing corporate credit card in Mexico, in Brazil, in Colombia, and each of the countries that we operate in. But we've expanded, beyond that to be, a solution that helps a company make a payment through any rails and manage it with our software platform.
Amazing. So we've got a really great pair of guests here today who are going to give you kind of the B2C as well as the B2B side of this topic. So got a nice contrast here that I think will be valuable for everybody. So to start off, I'd just love for you both to maybe reflect a bit on what is it about Latin America, fintech in Latin America, that has why is this such a resilient sector of the fintech market? Why have we just continued to see growth, new innovations, even amidst perhaps some struggles in other parts of the world or slowing momentum in other parts of the world? Maybe Miriam, if you want to start with that.
So I think we have to split the story between after or before COVID, right? I think COVID was a point in time that made things difficult. But for Clip, and I think in Mexico and in other countries, the reality is that there is a huge opportunity. The financial exclusion was huge in every market, in Brazil as well. And Clip had the opportunity of being launched in 2012 when there were no other solutions, and there was a huge need for merchants to start accepting payments. And we were able to launch not only with a very good product, but a great service and a wonderful distribution channel. And I think it's the only country where payments have been distributed with the retail channel. So with that, we were able to grow before the crisis of COVID. And actually, in 2021, we were able to receive a funding that gave us the status of unicorn. So we were the second unicorn in the market, the first fintech unicorn. And with that growth and with that funding, we have been able to continue evolving our products and sustaining during the crisis and after the crisis. And now we are the largest acquirer by number of merchants in the market.
And then Gerry, do you see that same kind of post-COVID, pre-COVID divide on your side as well?
I suppose so in many ways, though Clara did start post-COVID, so in a sense we've also ridden that wave. And it's great to share this stage here with Miriam, because as you mentioned, you're the fastest growing sub-acquirer in all of Mexico. We have the fastest growing corporate credit cards, like helping businesses make digital payments. And so in some ways, you're embodying why fintech is so important and, having this success in Latin America. And it's because, what we're solving for is really not just about convenience, which is what you see in other parts of the world. Yes, that's part of it. We're building, great software, great solutions on top of what we're doing. But in many cases, it's also about access, right? And especially when you move outside of Brazil, which is a bit further ahead than most of the rest of the region, you realize for many of your customers, they didn't have a way to accept digital payments before. In our case, many of our customers, we serve, from SMEs to startups to some of the largest enterprises. But especially when you get kind of below that top enterprise level, many customers in Mexico, many companies did not have access to a corporate credit card. And really both of those things, right? Having a card, a payment method to make digital payments instead of having to manage everything with cash or bank transfers, which are not as agile. But also the credit card piece where, folks that had long-standing relationships with their banks couldn't even get a small credit line or, a line tied to the card payment solution. So it's been really, surprising in some sense, but a great experience to see how, by building the way that we do, we can also enable access to these sorts of solutions to more companies and bring them into modernity, into a digital world. And financial services are so much the bedrock of a working market economy that, to go back to the question of why is fintech having this moment still in LatAm, is because we're still in the early innings, right? We still have to build those foundations that exist in the U.S., in other parts of the world.
Got it. No, thank you for that. Turning to the question of financial inclusion or providing, kind of banking the underbanked to the unbanked. Miriam, in the context of Clip, this is more of a banking unbanked consumers, where in the context of what you guys are doing, it's more of providing these financial services to small and medium-sized businesses. Let me talk a bit about what's the progress that you've seen been made on this front since you've, over the last 5-10 years since you started in this game, respectively. What's the maybe give us some the kind of real life color of how has this fintech movement in Latin America really have delivered real value to consumers and businesses alike?
We were talking a bit about some of it as first, you start with access to digital payments, to credit. And but I think what's most exciting is kind of what comes after, right? Because you're effectively transitioning a lot of the economy from analog payments, in cash, for example, to digital payments that are full of information, even at the point of transaction itself, right? So when you're paying someone in cash, it's not easy to know or have a record unless you're writing it down in a notebook manually, who paid, who else for what, kind of there was an approval layer for it. You don't necessarily have all this information about the merchant brought in. With digital payments, you can do that, right? You have this permanent, easy to audit record of who's paying who with what, who the merchant is, and we can bring that in. And then you can build all of this intelligence around hey, this merchant that you're paying is a secure, a verified merchant. You also have the security of card payment rails where if you're defrauded, you have recourse, right? As a payer, you can get reimbursed. You can build all sorts of intelligence around that, giving companies, instant visibility and insights into how they're spending so they can make better decisions. And, because the companies are better run, it means that they also end up getting access to other financial products, to more credit. And so it really starts creating this flywheel that I think is really exciting. And companies like ours that maybe start with a point solution, making the payments or acquiring payments with technology, there's so much that you can build around it. And that's, I think, the evolution that we're starting to see.
Amazing.
And I think it's the same that has been seen everywhere. As Gerry said, we started with payments in Clip and with card-present transactions. Card-not-present transactions in Mexico were non-existent, honestly speaking. COVID actually forced us to go card-not-present. But 60% of the merchants that Clip serves had never taken cards before. They are new to payments. And when they are new to payments, they first need to trust that you are going to pay them, right? It's the money or their business. So we need to gain them trust. But once they have having transactions, Clip has evolved to create new products precisely for those merchants that haven't had any other financial service before. So we started with payments. Now we have a card as well. So we have a wallet for them to receive their payments immediately, like Pix, actually, but from cards. And now we as well are providing loans to payments based on their transactional record. So even though they don't have any type of credit history, because of the transactions we have, we are being able to assess their credit risk and actually give them credit. So they can start creating as well a credit history within the system. So everything is part of financial inclusion.
Yeah, and I love that because I think it's a great example of just like why electronic payments it's such a game-changing concept, right? And hoping we spend maybe a little bit of time just talking about like just the importance of electronic payments in facilitating financial inclusion in this regard, like you've just talked about. And as kind of a follow-on question to that, I would love to get some just color on these new instant payment systems that we're seeing being rolled out around the region. Like we have Spay in Mexico, which has been quite successful. You have Pix in Brazil, which has been like phenomenally successful. It's achieved a like 90% adoption rate within like 4 or 5 years. And how does these are almost like state-run utilities in a sense, like payment systems operated by a central bank in a sense. It's not really a proprietary thing. But how do these types of systems factor into like your business models and your product offerings as you're kind of looking forward?
So we get to see, as a company that's operating in Mexico and Brazil, kind of the two anchor countries in the region, just the kind of differences in how they're evolving. And in many ways, as we discussed, Brazil's a bit further ahead. And, specifically with the launch of Pix, which is a very popular payment method, especially with consumers, but increasingly with businesses as well. So naturally, we expanded to support Pix payments. We have an IP, Instituto de Pagamento license from Bacen here, so we can do that. Of course, we also support boleto payments. So like really, you want to be able to support all the different payment methods that are relevant in the country. When we take that to the Mexico context, you still have cards that are growing quite rapidly in adoption, and you have the Spay instant payment system, which is popular among businesses, but not at the point of sale transaction, and therefore with consumers. So, for us, like we support Spay, but then there's no like Pix equivalent that's really getting like as widespread adoption as it is in Brazil. But as a business, we see kind of where these trends are going, and ultimately we believe that there's a lot of value in creating this platform that allows you to make and manage all of your payments, agnostic of like which payment rails it is, because when new payment solutions come, like Pix, or in your case, coming from the crypto world, we're seeing a lot of interest around stable coins, especially to settle FX transactions. Then you want a partner, you want a technology partner, as if you're a business that can help you expand to that.
So from the merchant point of view, and mainly when you serve smaller merchants that are new to payments, we have to be careful to enable whatever is relevant for them. Otherwise, it will be confusing. So the problem with CODI, that is the Pix for Mexico, that actually was launched before Pix. So this is sad. It was launched before Pix. But I think there were some elements that made it not as successful as Pix. First, in Mexico, only 50% of the population had an account. So 50% of the grown-up didn't have an account, adults in Mexico. When in Brazil, I think 85% of the population already had a bank account. Second, the customer experience was not the best. And third, there were not incentives to promote the usage of CODI. So because of these three elements, among others, CODI hasn't been as successful as expected. Additionally, the standards that CODI enabled were not international standards. It was a custom-made QR code. So imagine enabling a QR that is out of standard, and suddenly you have other wallets, and they come to a small merchant and say, well, what type of QR are you using? You cannot make such a cumbersome experience for a merchant when they are small. So I think it has been a challenge to promote this type of payment in smaller merchants, but we are willing to enable whatever is relevant for a merchant. If at some point loyalty programs are relevant, like Bancomer's loyalty program, it's very interesting. We will enable it. But CODI so far hasn't reached the level that PIX did or JAPE did in Peru.
And then pivoting to talk a bit about the regulatory side, because I know you're operating in several markets with several different regulatory environments. And just as we were chatting backstage, we were talking about how sometimes regulation can be kind of the key that unlocks some of these opportunities. It gives both the operators as well as the merchants and the end users more certainty about using these products. But maybe talk a bit about how has maybe the regulatory climate for these types of solutions improved in the various markets you operate in? And maybe how has this helped how can this be maybe like a case study in terms of is actually good at like unlocking some opportunities that didn't exist before?
Well, actually, really, Mexico is a beautiful story in one side and a very sad story in the other side. Mexico was the first one launching a legal reform to launch aggregators in the market in 2014. It was the first market in the region. Mexico was the first launching a fintech law in 2016, 18. So initially there have been changes that allow us to exist, but the big issue is that nothing happened afterwards. So regulation hasn't evolved. We are still waiting for some regulation in the fintech law for open finance, for example. ICOFESE, that is our antitrust authority, actually issue a recommendation in payments that there are some monopolic or antitrust activities in the market that require new regulation, and it happened in 2020 and 2023, and so far nothing has happened. So regulation is key to actually continue pushing for the evolution and the financial inclusion in the markets. I think we had done it well, but it's still a lot to do.
Yeah, you kind of see the tale of two countries play out a bit, right? And it can't be said enough. Like Brazil has really
done it perfectly.
By their example, set the example for the region, and it's really come in waves, right? I mean, you have a regulator that really has done a lot to incentivize competition and innovative products. First in acquiring, then in payments, especially in cards, and then more recently in PIX as well. So I think that there's a lot to laud about what's happened in Brazil. I think, as Miriam, as you pointed out, the intention has been there in other countries, and certainly in Mexico, where a country was early to publishing an actual fintech law. But I think there's been probably like a gap between those good intentions and that start, with following up with complementary regulation, updating the existing regulation to address unwanted, undesired initial impacts, and to continue to promote competition in other ways. So I think you see in Mexico that it is harder, it's more difficult for a company to be both a leading traditional financial institution giving security to depositors, and also innovative. And I think you see this affecting fintechs, but you also see it affecting traditional banks. And so, we can hope, and obviously there's like lobbying efforts and such that, the laws, the regulator will promote new rules that make it easier for one company to be both of those things. But there's another possibility, and one that we see, very much at Clara, which is as a technology company, like half of our business, like half of our, team is working in engineering, product, et cetera. We can focus on being really excellent at building technology, building the product itself, and then seek to partner with financial institutions. And so we end up doing that quite a bit more for our operation in Mexico, where we operate with various banks. For example, with Goldman Sachs, we have a credit facility that we use to fund the card receivables and the operations of our customers. We have other banks that are actually customers of Clara, and they use the product internally, and then they end up promoting it to their customers. So we have, referral partnerships, and we help them also land business in other products that we ourselves are not offering. And we see a ton of potential down that path. I mean, I think it's adapting to the reality of the market, and we're seeing more and more that some of these traditional banks, financial institutions, see how they can also benefit from this formula. So, I think as entrepreneurs, we're ultimately adaptable, and there's no doubt that it's a pretty different situation in Brazil than in Mexico, but I think there's a path forward in both places.
I would say that is precisely the answer to your first questions. Why fintechs are so resilient? Because they are always looking for different ways to solve the problems. They don't just stay with a no. They always find a way to succeed.
You have to.
Precisely.
I love that. So almost out of time here, but to wrap up, I'm going to pose two kind of lightning round questions here that we'll wrap up with. One, just give us a quick glimpse of your strategic priorities for expanding in the region in the years ahead. What are you kind of focused on? What are you honing in on? And any like particular emerging technologies that you're excited about, like whether it's AI or stable coins or any of the stuff we see at this conference that you find particularly relevant to your business model?
Yeah. So we operate today in Mexico, Brazil, Colombia. That's about 2/3 of the region's GDP. And we do work with our customers in other countries with our software platform as well. But focus on going deep into the 3 countries that are core to us today. And very excited about AI and all the ways that we're building it into the product. Just think, every time you upload a receipt into our platform, we can automatically parse it and give it to you in structured data. You can see what was paid for exactly. How much is in tax, how much is in tip. We can flag things automatically if they're outside of policy, etc. We automatically give our customers intelligence, so it's like they have a financial analyst going with them. And there's a bunch of really manual tasks, like recovering an invoice or setting up a boleto for payment that we can facilitate because of AI. And it's like having a bunch of workers for you just because you have Clara. So that's super exciting, I think.
For us, there are two ways. Internally, we are trying to enable AI to make our teams more efficient, right? And to be able to create new things faster and better. But externally, and Clip is only focused in Mexico. And as we said, Mexico is still quite behind other countries. It's not going to work. So that is why QR and NFC could be a big trigger for that.
Amazing. Well, Gerry, Miriam, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for watching here and participating in our panel. And just congratulations on the great work you've done, and wishing you both success in the years to come here.
Thank you.